Uncommon Sense with the Senior Delinquents.
When disasters strike, whether natural or man-made, disrupting people's lives, the news becomes hyper-focused on coping with the situation. But while it's critical to keep people informed, there is an issue with how much is enough, or just too much, to the point of being obsessive. Welcome to another edition of Uncommon Sense with the Senior Delinquents. I'm Dennis Owers here in Las Vegas, along with my co-host Jamie McWilliams, who is in Tampa, Florida. You know, Jamie, you and I have both worked in the television news business, but Jamie, it seems like things have changed an awful lot today. Do you agree?
I agree, Dennis. We probably both remember this when we were youngsters. The news nationally was about 15 minutes and then
Right.
locally 15. Locally, that went to a half an hour, usually the dinner hour, maybe the morning. But that contracted a bit because once sports became so big with ESPN, they went
Right.
back to very short segments of sports just for local news. Nationally now, you can get news 24 hours a day with streaming. And locally, here in Tampa, at 4 a.m., you can get local news going to 10 a.m. In the afternoon, we pick it up around 3 o'clock, another station, and they go all the way up to 6:30 when the national comes on. So we have more than enough news, and I have to assume we got something similar like that in Vegas.
Not quite as much, but as you know, we're a 24-hour town. People are getting off of work in the middle of the night, and we start about 5 a.m. That goes to 9 o'clock. In the afternoon, start at about 3, and they go to 6. And like you, then it goes to national news. And a lot of that is repeat stuff. I want to introduce a guy who's been in the news business for decades. He's an award-winning anchor, lots of experience. He is the perfect guy to talk about this, Gerard Ramallo. Gerard, it's great to see you, and thank you for spending some time on Senior Delinquents. I've got a question for you. You know, disasters happen every day in this country, whether it be a shooting, a fire, a drowning, war as such as we're covering now. Why do you think certain news organizations or stations cover these events almost ad nauseum? Because you've been there.
Oh, absolutely. I've covered a number of natural disasters, including Hurricane Katrina, wildfires in California, floods. The media is a business, and there are certain audiences that follow certain TV stations or read certain periodicals, certain papers. And so the mediums are catering to these audiences, and they can tell day to day, hour to hour, if people are watching. They, of course, have readership numbers. And if those numbers are consistent with a particular story, then what they're going to do is look for another angle to continue that same story so that they can keep that audience. And that's essentially why some stories get covered for weeks on end.
When I lived in the Northeast, we would have snowstorms, and the coverage used to be, you want updates, just so you know, do I go
Yep.
out? Do I stay in? But now, prior to my moving to Florida, it would be all day. When you say the ratings stay there, it's just, it must be some kind of crazed core group. Maybe they just leave it on. There's always a saturation point.
With respect to weather on a national scale, weather equals ratings. You know, we're
Wow.
out here in Las Vegas. In the summertime, it's 110 every day for 3 or 4 months, right? The weather really is not changing. And yet, many of the local newscasts begin their news with weather. And it's just a
Right.
proven fact that people want to see what the weather is. For a lot of people, it's, you know, they're starting their day. They want to know if the roads are open. They want to know if, you know, can I wear
Right.
a light shirt, or do I have to have a coat, or is it going to be 110 again, or are we going to get some relief? Is it going to go down 5 degrees? That makes a big difference to a lot of people. So weather is a ratings driver 100%, and it's
Interesting.
consistent. And yeah, and there's the numbers and the demos and the minutia of how all of this is calculated is very, very precise. They know when you tune in. They know everything about your viewing habits, and all of this is calculated down to, well, what are we going to cover? What are we going to show on air?
How stressful is it on you as an anchor saying that I'm just saying the same things that at some point it's like in the movie
Yeah.
that Dennis Quaid did where he played the sports hero. He says, I've told this story so many times that it just sounds like bullshit now. It doesn't sound real in a way. Is it stressful for you to try to keep it going?
It can be very, very frustrating if that's what's happening. But see, a good producer will only include, a little bit of weather off the top, or it could be an ongoing news event. If it's if it's something like a shooting that affected a lot of people, there's ongoing developments. Take, for example, what's happening in Israel. If you're one of the network broadcasters, I mean, you're going to be covering this every day because there are literally developments every day and it affects the entire world.
In the case of Fox News, the word must be to cover it blanketly. And
Yeah.
at some point, though, it does shift over to there's other things happening in the world. And that's the other side of it.
Sure.
Because,
Yeah.
an interesting, when you talk about these things and you talk about national crises, and one of the things that it was very surprising is that in the Holocaust and with the concentration camps, as bad as it was, they found that a normalcy of sorts evolved because people cannot live in a crisis situation forever. They have to
Right.
find a way to normalize.
Yeah, you also have to look at ownership groups. You have to look at, okay, Fox leans conservative, CNN leans liberal, and they're going to gravitate toward their audiences. It's mostly money driven, and
Yeah.
money comes from
Yeah.
ratings. News when I was growing up and when you all were growing up, I'm sure you remember it was very objective and neutral, and this was the story, and it was very kind of clear and concise, and there wasn't so much variation. But now people are getting their news from, phones, from every possible source. So you've got all different types of content coming in, and all those media sources, whether they be professional or something that's not professional, a kid with a cell phone, they're all competing for audience. Audience is what drives what viewers tune into. You've got YouTube influencers, you've got TikTok influencers. They're putting together content that their audience likes. And if they like that content, they're going to do more of
Right.
that content. Same difference
Right.
in news. It's a
Yeah.
business.
Does the increase in ratings or viewership stay about the same after a channel is done reporting on a disaster?
You will get an influx of audience when there's a big major event, especially if it's in your neighborhood,
Right.
and people will tune in and they will stay tuned as long as it appears that there are developments. It's a constant flux, and there are people that just study the ratings and determine, okay, this is what we're going to cover today.
Well, you don't have the hurricanes and you don't have the snowstorms, but I know that when that comes up, people go out and they sort of go a little nuts in terms of stockpiling supplies, the fear of running out
Oh,
of things.
yeah.
I wonder to what degree you think in these situations is fear driven, and has it gotten so sophisticated that actually advertisers may just say, toilet paper, let's get on the air and make sure that we let people know about that. Is that at all a factor that you've encountered?
Yeah, one of the ratings drivers that I haven't talked about yet is sensationalism. And we saw back in the 70s and 80s, we had tabloid journalism, Inside Edition and hard copy. And they looked like newscasts, but really they were gossip, entertainment rags. And they kind of played loose with the truth, and they were very
Yeah.
sensational. Today, what we see in the media, a lot of sensationalism driving coverage. Extreme ideology here and extreme ideology here. And these sensational elements are going to get coverage and drivers when really, if you want to take a good, cross section of the community, we're not in these zones. We're here in the middle. We're kind of more in the common sense zone. But the fringe, because it's so sensational, is going to get that coverage and it's going to draw audience. Social media is largely responsible for this. You and I grew up in a 60 Minutes generation where we wanted content. and all of the details. Well, now we're living in a TikTok generation where people want 5 seconds of stimulation, truth be damned, just show me something that makes me laugh or is, sexually interesting or whatever, and that's what's going to get my attention. So this is what traditional news is up against, this kind of sensational draw, if you will. I think there will be a pendulum swing back to, you know, ethics and journalism, because people
Yeah.
want truth and they're starved for objectivity, and you know I believe there's going to be a shift, because it's not all about ratings. Eventually all
Yeah.
audience is going to tune out if you're not telling me
Yeah.
the truth. When there's a disaster or there's a major event, that's an opportunity to gain viewers and gain readers. Keeping them is where the strategy and the, you know, improvisation, if you will, comes into play, because that's a much harder task.
I think it's safe to say that sensationalism always will sell, and it's been sensational having you here. Wouldn't you agree, Dennis?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Gerard. Great information.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
You could catch all of the Senior Delinquents episodes on our websites, as well as various other social media platforms.
Well, Dennis, I'm not worried about a natural disaster because I've got my tissue, I got my booze. So until next time, hi ho, Silvers, away!